Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. Welcome to this special edition of the Anthony's Morris Returns channel. 5 days from now, so I'm recording on the 17th of February. 5 days from now, it will be exactly 1 year since Anthony Morris III was ousted from the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. And to commemorate that, I have decided to create this video in which I talk about the reasons why he was removed from the governing body and why he will most likely never speak out. So before we get into that, let's just remind ourselves of the announcement that was made upon Anthony Morris's removal from the governing body. So it said on Wednesday, February the 22nd, 2023, it was announced at World Headquarters that Brother Anthony Morris III is no longer serving as a member of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. And with that one sentence, Anthony Morris's reign at the top of the Jehovah's Witnesses leadership came to an end. Well, what exactly happened? And is it possible that we'll ever hear from Anthony Morris III? I will be getting into that in a moment, but for now, let's roll the special intro that I've created for this special edition.
Give me a drink. Okay. We're trying to eat breakfast here. And you don't get more responsibility than being a member of the governing body. I am the humblest man I know. They just won't shut up. No? You know, we all know better than, argue with God. The God we worship expects this to stop. Real simple. Give me a drink.
Somehow we dilly-and-dally, takes us years, and we wonder why.
What are you waiting for?
Upon Anthony Morris's removal from the governing body, there were lots of theories because obviously the organization was not forthcoming as to the reasons why he was removed from the governing body. And there's been a lot of speculation. There's been a lot of theories that have been put forth. I'm going to talk about some of the key theories that have been put forward, and I will mention why those theories are most likely not accurate. And then I will talk about the actual reason as to why he was eventually removed from the governing body. So there's four main theories that came up that I've seen floating around on the internet. And theory number one has to do with Bottlegate. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can just Google Bottlegate, Tony Morris or Anthony Morris, and it will take you to this video that I will just show you an excerpt of.
Hey, have a good one.
Yep.
I see you're a fan of Scotch. Do you know anything about Irish whiskey?
Yeah. I'm not a lot. My wife likes it.
Yeah.
Jameson's always
Yeah.
Popular.
I usually get Bushnells, but I don't know anything about these newer ones.
Yeah. The Jameson's been good long time.
Yeah.
So Bottlegate was the scandal where Anthony Morris was caught on camera buying very expensive liquor. He bought expensive liquor in huge amounts that he then loaded onto his car. If you watch that video in full, you'll be able to see that. And so there's been this theory that this was the reason why Anthony Morris was removed from the governing body. However, I don't think that theory is accurate at all because, first of all, Anthony Morris was not doing anything wrong. Just by spending lots of money and buying a lot of booze, that is not a reason to be removed from the governing body or to receive any kind of sanctions from the Jehovah's Witness organization. There is nothing in the Jehovah's Witness literature in the rules that bars people from spending excessive amounts of money buying booze. And also the fact that there was a huge duration of time that elapsed since Watergate and Anthony Morris's removal from the governing body. So I don't know the exact dates, but the video that I looked at, the YouTube video that I showed you, was published in November of 2020, and it was only at the beginning of 2023 that Anthony Morris was removed from the governing body. So if at all it was true that Watergate was the cause for his removal, why take so much time when this had been made so public and so many people had seen those videos? There were people that actually even wrote into the world headquarters, and one of the persons that had good communications with one of the helpers of the governing body. There is a rumor, anyway, that this one individual contacted the helper to the governing body, and the response was governing body members. Some of them have inherited wealth, or they used to work in secular jobs before going into Bethel, so they have their own personal wealth, and they do sometimes entertain guests, and that was possibly the reason why Anthony Morris bought alcohol in such huge amounts. So so the Watergate theory is definitely not one to rely on when we're trying to uncover why Anthony Morris III was removed from the governing body. Let's look at theory number 2. So theory number 2 suggests that it was due to Anthony Morris's old age or ill health that he was removed from the governing body. Now, again, that is not a viable theory, because we know that governing body members serve until death unless there is actual serious reasons why they're to be removed. We know of the most famous or infamous example, someone being removed, was that of Ray Franz in 1980, and that was because he was charged with apostasy, and there were other governing body members such as Ewart Chitty and Leo Greenlees that were also removed for some perceived misconduct. Just to give you an example of how long governing body members can serve, I'm going to show you an excerpt from the video Jehovah's Witnesses Organized to Share the Good News that was published in 2006, and you're going to see Kari W. Barber, who will comment on.
In the first century, the sharing of good news was governed by a body of spirit-anointed
these
men.
features, Jesus described that the field is the world. That's the world of mankind.
Likewise today, the
So there you see governing body member Kari W. Barber.
entire worldwide organization is directed by a group of mature Christian men called the governing body.
Now, Kari Barber served on the governing body until he was 101 years old. He died at the age of 101. That video was published in 2006, so that footage may have been taken either in 2006 or sometime in 2005, and he was still serving as a member of the governing body beyond the age of 100. So his old age, his infirmity, the difficulties with health did not hinder him from continuing to serve. And we also have governing body members now that are currently serving that are not young at all. We have Samuel Head, we have Gerrit Lush. They don't even give talks in front of a live audience. Their talks, as far as we can see from JW Broadcasting, are always pre-recorded, and yet they continue serving as governing body members. So definitely it was not because of Anthony Morris's age or ill health. In fact, Anthony Morris could even be considered one of the younger members of the governing body, having been born in 1950 and now in his early 70s. So he would be 74 this year. And there's governing body members that are much older than him and continue serving. So it has nothing to do with his age, and very likely has nothing to do with his health. Let's discuss theory number 3. Theory number 3 has to do with a conspiracy, that there was some kind of a dispute regarding a doctrine, a Jehovah's Witness doctrine, between Stephen Lett and Anthony Morris III. And in this dispute, Anthony Morris lost the support of the other governing body members, where Stephen Lett garnered the support of the rest of the governing body and therefore was able to oust Anthony Morris III. Now, just to give you the context of what this supposed dispute was all about, I'm going to show you some video footage from the governing body update number 1, which was produced in 2020. And here is Stephen Lett speaking.
So the events unfolding around us are making clearer than ever that we're living in the final part of the last days, undoubtedly the final part of the final part of the last days, shortly before the last day of the last days.
There is Stephen Lett, clearly very, very excited. He was speaking during the heat of the COVID-19 pandemic when they started issuing these governing body updates. And Stephen Lett was very, very excited, almost suggesting that we're almost there. We're almost at the end of this system of things. Now, a few months later, at the 2021 annual meeting of Jehovah's Witnesses, Anthony Morris makes some statements that seem to suggest that he is disputing Stephen Lett's comments regarding the last of the last days, the final part of the final part of the last days. So let's watch this. This is an extended video clip from Anthony Morris's talk, and the talk was entitled "Why We Must Keep on the Watch," and this was given at the 2021 annual meeting of Jehovah's Witnesses. So let's have a listen.
Many years ago, my sons, Jesse and Paul, were in the early years of school, elementary school. And back at the time, I haven't heard it a lot lately, but from time to time, this would come up at a social gathering. Now, mind you, they're second grade, first grade, but these boys were thinkers. So they'd listen and they appreciated all these older ones. And we had a number of them in Rhode Island, longtime servants of Jehovah God. However, from time to time, this statement, and they'd be looking at my sons and, "Oh, you'll never graduate in this system. Not going to happen." So, I'm at their house. They just fed us. Lord help me, what am I going to do here? But this would come up from time to time, at least during those years. And maybe it was post-1975. I don't know. But they'd make these statements. And I'm going to give you a big confession because, this one comes clear to mind. Driving back from the gathering, Jesse and Paul are, thinking, and they're troubled. They're puzzled. What is this about? Why? Because, they had goals and what are we going to do? And they're thinking of things in the future for them as growing in their love for Jehovah. Is that true, Dad? And so I said, look, and let me tell you, these people saying these things were longtime servants, experienced people. If any of you are guilty, God loves you. He forgives you. If you did that back then, you didn't help anybody. But I'm going to give you a big confession. So that one particular night, we're driving back. It was a little distance from where we were. And they brought that up. They're sitting in the back seats, so we're having this conversation. And I told them, I said, look, you boys remember, you got to keep on the watch. This thing could go on and be ready for it to go to 2020. Honest. I mean, we're talking almost 40 years. Almost 40 years. I felt pretty safe with that. But you know what year this is. Now, just something to address the feelings that some have. And these are beautiful friends, different ones worshiping Jehovah for many decades. And we're only human. And it's the truth, but we're only human. So one brother wrote and appreciated his sincerity, and he said, during the annual meeting of 2019, the Ramapo project was announced. And if I remember right, it was stated that the project would be complete in a few years. With recent Watchtower articles telling us that we are in the last of the last days, beautiful expression, but words are powerful. It seemed a little disappointing that this may push Armageddon off a few years. This was his sincere concern, really. And you know he's not alone. They're only human.
So in this talk, Anthony Maurice III makes some comments that are very, very controversial. So one of the things is he criticizes people that were talking about 1975. He is suggesting that at the time he didn't believe that the end was near at all. He was saying to his kids that, you know, this system had gone 40 years into the future. Very controversial. The other controversial thing he says, which has led people to suggest that there was some kind of a doctrinal dispute between him and Stephen Lett, was he references the last of the last days statement, and he then appears to criticize that statement because he says, beautiful expression, but words are powerful. So he's mocking, in a sense, that statement of the last days. Now, on face value, it might appear that he is criticizing Stephen Lett because Stephen Lett was one that came on camera and really went in hard with that statement. Very, very excited. Now, a couple of things I want to say. First of all, the Anthony Morris is quoting somebody who's written in, commenting on that statement, that expression. And actually, if you go on the Watchtower online library and you put in the phrase last of the last days, this is something that's appeared in print. This is something that the entire governing body has approved of as a statement to describe the times in which we live. And it wasn't just Stephen Lett making that statement. It is an official Jehovah's Witness policy. And the second thing is that while Anthony Maurice III is expressing some cynicism, he is not directly attacking the statement. He's not directly attacking any other member of the governing body, let alone Stephen Lett. He's just stating that the fact that such expressions can excite people. And also, even if he was sort of challenging a statement or contradicting a statement that's been issued by the organization, this would not be the first time we would see this. There's lots of examples where governing body members say things that are in contrast to some of the doctrines and policies, or maybe not policies, but some of the doctrines of the Jehovah's Witnesses religion. You even have publications that come out and they state something that is slightly contradictory to something that's been published, because the whole religion is, and the belief system is very convoluted, such that actual leaders of the organization get confused as to what the doctrines are and what the current policies are. So it's not surprising to me that Anthony Maurice III would make a statement that appeared to be contradictory to what's been published in the literature, what another governing body member has said. Now, just to hammer in on the fact that I don't think there was any kind of doctrinal disagreement between Stephen Lett and Anthony Maurice III. Anthony Maurice III was just as excited as the rest of the governing body when the COVID-19 pandemic started. I think him and Stephen Lett were probably the most excited. They were the ones that expressed the excitement the most on camera in their talks. So I'm going to show you an excerpt from a Gilead graduation program that happened round about the time when the COVID-19 pandemic started. So that would have been March 2020. And we're going to hear Anthony Maurice III's comments, and he is expressing a lot of excitement, very, very similar to Stephen Lett's statement. So let's have a listen in and see what you think.
It's absolutely essential. Some of the things you've endured already in your dedicated life, and as told the brothers in the coordinators committee office, you know, when we're facing these disasters and all these things, and I've been telling them for some time now, cheer up, it's going to get worse. And so we keep a sense of humor with it, but that's a fact. What we're experiencing right now in this global pandemic I was telling the branch class yesterday, it doesn't bother me. We've been waiting for this. We knew things like this were going to happen. Christ Jesus has prepared us. Where's the shock? Now you got to think, and Jehovah directs us with how to deal with these things, but we endure.
So that was Anthony Morris III speaking in March 2020 at a Gilead graduation program, and he's referencing the pandemic, and he's basically saying, it doesn't bother me. This is what we've been waiting for. In other words, we've been waiting for the end to come. And at the time when he issued these comments, I was actually at the School for Kingdom Evangelizers, and we had a talk by a member of the branch committee. I will maybe talk about this in another video. Our school was a bit unusual. It was curtailed. We didn't do the full 8 weeks as most other students who go through this school would because of the pandemic. But we had a talk from member of the Britain branch committee, Stephen Paps, and he just attended the branch school that Anthony Morris is referencing in that video. And his comments, now my classmates might correct me if I've misremembered this, but his comments were the governing body are actually feeling how close we are to the end of the system of things. And he referenced these comments that Anthony Morris III is saying he made to the branch class, saying, it doesn't bother me, this is what we've been waiting for. And apparently that was the feeling among all the governing body members, or at least that's the feeling that Anthony Morris was representing to the branch committee members that attended that branch class. So when Stephen Lett says we're in the final part of the last days, he's not saying anything that would be contradictory to the feelings of Anthony Morris III. So I do not buy this conspiracy that there was this doctrinal dispute that led to Anthony Morris III's ouster. I do think that he was just, even though he makes some very careless comments in his talk at the annual meeting, that he was very much in line with the official policy of the Jehovah's Witnesses at that time. And I don't accept that theory that that there was this dispute between him and Stephen Lett, and that's what led to his ouster. So let's consider the final theory, theory number 4. Theory number 4 is a suggestion that there was some kind of a policy disagreement between Anthony Morris III and the rest of the governing body. I'm using the word policy broadly. That could refer to maybe some kind of a doctrinal disagreement with the rest of the governing body. The suggestion is that Anthony Morris III was very antagonistic. He was impeding the governing body making some changes, and therefore they decided to have him removed from the governing body. One of the theories is that that's the reason they brought in Jeffrey Winder and Gage Flegel, so that they could get enough numbers to push Anthony Morris III out of the governing body, and then they could push through some of the doctrinal changes that they wanted to make. And people have made reference to recent changes that we've seen in the organization. For example, the reverse of the policy against beards, the change to the hour reporting, where ordinary publishers are not required to report the amount of time that they spend in the field ministry. And those have been cited as examples showing that Anthony Morris was against these radical changes, and therefore they had to push him out of the governing body to push through these changes. Now, I just do not agree with that policy. I do not, or rather, I do not buy that theory. And actually, the governing body members have come on camera and they have made statements to indicate that it is actually not the case that they would need to remove the governing body member just because they wanted to make some changes. And I'm going to show you footage from the 2023 annual meeting. These are comments by Jeffrey Winder, one of the newest members, one of the two newest members of the governing body. He is explaining how the governing body arrive at any doctrinal or any policy changes. And if you listen to his words carefully, you're going to see that they actually do not need, or they would not go as far as removing a governing body member just because the governing body member is opposed to certain proposed changes. So let's have a listen to Jeffrey Winder.
So generally, the process happens this way. First of all, a question comes up. And so it could be that a governing body member in his personal study or his personal Bible reading notices something that then raises a question. Or it could be that a question comes up during the preparation or translation of spiritual food that requires more consideration. World events might put the spotlight on a particular prophecy that then gets closer attention. So in one way or another, a question comes up. And that question is then put on the governing body's agenda for discussion. And the question is, does this require or warrant additional research? The brothers are not making a final decision on what the new understanding will be, just asking, does it warrant additional research? And if the answer is yes, then a research team is assigned to provide recommendations and research for the governing body to consider. Well, once that whole research package is compiled, it's placed back on the governing body's agenda for review. And of course, once it goes on the agenda, then each individual member of the governing body, under prayer, reviews the information and thinks about it in preparation for the meeting. And then it's discussed as a group at the governing body meeting, again, under prayer, relying on Jehovah's Holy Spirit. And when this matter is discussed, the discussion is not rushed, nor is the decision forced. But often, like in the first century, it's a lively discussion as the brothers feel free to share their opinions and their thoughts, the results of their meditation and their research. But there's also humility there. Because again, none of the brothers are trying to force their idea or try to get their thoughts approved, but there is this collective, unified desire to see Jehovah's direction on the matter and where is he steering things. And the brothers are looking for a unanimous decision. At times it may seem like this is a solid adjustment, but if it's not unanimous, it just might not be time yet for it to be revealed. So it's not forced. The matter is set aside. And it could be that sometime later, even some years later, the matter comes back up and then it sails right through. Or maybe it does get approved, but now with a couple of key points discerned that weren't discerned earlier.
So there is Jeffrey Winder, one of the two most recent appointees to the governing body. He is shedding a lot of light on how the governing body members come up with doctrinal or policy changes. And he makes some very interesting comments. So one of the things he says is that it's not forced and it's not rushed. And he also states that sometimes it can take several years before they make a change, because it apparently, even if one governing body member is vehemently opposed to a proposed change, then they would shelf that and wait until either that governing body member changes his mind, or could be that they wait until the governing body member actually dies, and then they revisit that. And then once they have unanimity, they can then proceed with that change. So just because a governing body member is opposed to some policy changes is not a reason, from what Jeffrey Winder is saying, that's not a reason to have them removed from the governing body. And those of you who are watching this who've served as elders can understand that. Sometimes an elder can be extremely controversial. They can be antagonistic. They can be against certain decisions. Say, for example, the appointment of a brother as a ministerial servant or as an elder. And the other elders on the body can understand that maybe this person is being unreasonable. But they would not, generally speaking, that would not be a reason for that individual to be removed from their position as an elder. They would just either wait until and sit it out until this elder comes round, or the elder moves to a different congregation or something. They wouldn't go as far as removing him, and especially at the governing body level, where the removal of a governing body member can have so many ramifications, can raise so many questions in the minds of Jehovah's Witnesses. I just don't see the governing body going as far as removing Anthony Morris just because he was opposed to certain changes. So I'm also going to show you additional footage from jw.org. This time it's David's plane, and he was speaking a few years earlier, a few years before Jeffrey Winder gave those clarifying remarks. And if you watch this video in full, it was a morning worship program entitled "How the Faithful and Discreet Slave Make Their Decisions," and he gives several examples of changes that we have seen in more recent years. Maybe they're not so recent depending on your age, but these are changes we've definitely seen in our lifetime. And he talks about how those changes were made and how long it took from the time those changes were initially proposed to the time they came into action. So this is very, very interesting. So I'm just going to play this footage, and I will make some comments afterwards.
Well, there have been so many changes. It's hard to keep up. We hear that a lot, and it's true. So the question is, how do these changes come about? Does the governing body get together on a Wednesday morning and say, well, what'll we change this week? Let's throw the brotherhood off guard a little bit. That would not be faithful or discreet. The fact is that although changes may seem to be announced one after another, the decision to put the changes into effect is often years in the making. Now let's consider a couple of other examples. Beginning the first week of January 2009, the school, service meeting, and the congregation book study were merged. Now that decision was almost 10 years in the making. As far back as 1999, it was being discussed. Well, then, why wasn't the decision made 10 years earlier? Because the governing body wanted to be sure. Will the brothers have what they need? Will they have all of the spiritual food they need if we merge the meetings? Now, the same principles apply to clarifications in our beliefs. The governing body loves to get together and discuss the Bible. And when those Bibles come out on the table, and when the brothers bring their research in, and they're starting to search the Scriptures and analyze the Scriptures, you see the happy smiles on their faces. The brothers love discussing spiritual things. But the clarifications are often a long time in coming into print. Why? Because the clarification on one Scripture can have a domino effect on others. The clarification on one Scripture can have ramifications on other prophecies, so we have to be absolutely sure that everything fits. So to reiterate, although certain changes may be announced one after another, these decisions are thought out very carefully. And here's an interesting side point. The older members of the governing body, Brother Jairus, Brother Barr, were just as interested in making the adjustments as the younger members were. They were very progressive.
Apparently, making changes is all to do with being progressive. It has nothing to do with whether that's what's in the Bible, whether that's what God wants, whether that's what's in the best interests of Jehovah's Witnesses. It just has to do with whether one is progressive or not, according to David's plane. But David's plane there makes very, very interesting comments that are very much in line with what Jeffrey Winder was saying about the changes. So he actually gives an example of a change that was 10 years in the making. And it just shows you how thick-skinned these men on the governing body are. They can realize that a policy or a doctrine is not scriptural or it's not beneficial to the Jehovah's Witnesses, but they will go out, they will give talks, they will pretend to be in agreement with that teaching, and they will wait until they are all unanimous and are in agreement to make the change. So it all has to do with being a company man if you are to survive on the governing body. And this is what David's plane here is suggesting. So if you are a governing body member and you believe something needs to be changed, and there is a governing body member or a couple of governing body members that are opposed to change, even if you realize that that would be the best thing to do, your strategy is to keep quiet, to wait, even if it means waiting 10 years or longer, until all governing body members fall in line, and then the change goes through. And in the meantime, you just have to act like you agree with the current teaching or the current understanding. And so if, for example, we were to argue that Anthony Morris III was opposed to some of the changes that other governing body members were trying to push through, the other governing body members all had to act like they agreed with the current standing until Anthony Morris III came in line, or until, for whatever reason, he left the governing body, either through death or other reasons. Just because Anthony Morris is opposed to a change does not mean that he needs to be removed from the governing body, as you can hear from the comments of the very recent comments by Jeffrey Winder, and the more less recent comments by David Splain. So this theory that Anthony Morris III was removed because the governing body members wanted to push through changes, as you can see, it just doesn't hold any water. And in fact, Anthony Morris III, even though he made a lot of controversial comments, for example, the tight pants comments, these comments later on became official Jehovah's Witness policy. So initially when he said them in a talk, but then that was then printed in the Watchtower. There were pictures in the magazines. I remember at the time, the outline that the circuit overseers used to give to ministerial servants and elders, there was a huge section where they discussed this tight pants, and to be on the watch for brothers wearing tight pants, and to give them counsel and so on. So that, even though you could say maybe it was initially Anthony Morris's opinion, that was then approved by the rest of the governing body and became official policy. And in terms of his actual comments, Anthony Morris's comments, even though they were sometimes left field, they were very controversial, they were very, he seemed to be very opinionated. Everything he said was very much in line with the official Jehovah's Witnesses doctrines and policies. He never said anything that you couldn't go into the literature and back it up with. So he wasn't just making up stuff as he went along. Even though the way he voiced it was controversial, he was very much speaking in harmony with the current understanding of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And with regards to changes, him being opposed to changes, there were a lot of changes that were made during the time he was on the governing body. And one of the more recent ones is this one from early 2023. Let's have a look at Mark Sanderson speaking in a governing body update number 1 for 2023.
We are very pleased to announce that the governing body has decided to adjust the hour requirements for pioneers effective March 1st, 2023. You may want to get a pen or something to write this down. Are you ready? Here are the new requirements. For regular pioneers, the requirement will now be 600 hours per year. That is an average of 50 hours per month. For auxiliary pioneers, the requirement will now be 30 hours. But notice this. This is very exciting. During March and April, and during the month of the Circuit Overseer's visit, publishers can choose to auxiliary pioneer with a reduced hour requirement of 15 hours. This should make it possible for many more of us to share as auxiliary pioneers during those months of special activity. What about special pioneers and missionaries? They will now have an hour requirement of 100 hours per month. Sisters who are serving as special pioneers or missionaries and who are 40 years of age or older have a reduced hour requirement of 90 hours.
So there was Mark Sanderson announcing this adjustment to the hour requirements for regular pioneers, special pioneers, field missionaries, and auxiliary pioneers. Now, I think there is this perception that Anthony Morris III was one of the hardline governing body members. He was very much interested in maintaining the status quo, and he wasn't really interested in softening any of the policies that affected the lives of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, look at the timing of this announcement. This announcement was made in January 2023, the January 2023 governing body update number 1. And at the time, as far as we know, Anthony Morris III was still very much a member of the governing body. It was in that month, January, that the 2 new governing body members were announced, and it was only a month later that we got the announcement that Anthony Morris would no longer be serving on the governing body. So apparently, it looks like Anthony Morris III, for we know, was very much in favor, or he was definitely not opposed to this change. Otherwise, this change would not have gone through, as we have learned from the comments by Jeffrey Winder and David Splain. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that Anthony Morris III seemed to be very much a company man. He seemed to very much make comments that were in line and in harmony with the current understanding of the governing body. And even if he was opposed to any changes, that would not be out of the ordinary. The governing body are used to that. They can sit out a change for years and years until the governing body member who's opposed to it comes in line or leaves the governing body for various reasons unrelated to the fact that he is opposed to change. So I definitely do not buy this theory that Anthony Morris III was removed because he had a policy disagreement or the kind of disagreement with other governing body members. So those were the kind of the key conspiracies or theories that I've seen floating around online, and I just wanted to comment on each one of them and show you some footage from actual Jehovah's Witness videos, just to show that actually it's unlikely that it was for any of those reasons that Anthony Morris III was removed from the governing body. Now, I'm going to comment on why Anthony Morris III was removed from the governing body, and I'm going to use the Jehovah's Witnesses literature. I'm going to very much use the Shepherd the Flock of God book, which is the Elders Manual that Jehovah's Witnesses use to, or shall I say that the governing body uses to govern the lives of Jehovah's Witnesses through the elders. Now, you could be saying, well, that's different because that's an elders manual that's used for the congregation. That may not necessarily be the policy that's used for governing body members. But I think what you need to consider is who writes these policies. This manual is written by, well, if not by the governing body themselves, but definitely with the approval and the direction of the governing body. So it is very unlikely that they would write rules that do not apply to themselves, or that are completely contrary to the way they would handle things. And as we're going to be looking at some of these rules, you can clearly see that these rules are written in the best interests of people who are in positions of power. And therefore, I think the truth as to why Anthony Morris III was removed from the governing body lies in the pages of the Shepherd the Flock of God book, the manual that is used by elders to govern the lives of Jehovah's Witnesses. So let's go into this book, Shepherd the Flock of God. I'm just going to bring it up on the screen here. And I'm just going to show you. So this is my copy of Shepherd the Flock of God, which I've downloaded onto my JW library app. And that you can see there the front page, Shepherd the Flock of God. And I'm just going to show you what edition I am looking at here. So I'm looking at the October 2023 edition of Shepherd the Flock of God book. Now, some of you may be aware that this book is updated at least every 6 months. So it's updated usually every April and every October. And again, it just begs the question. So apparently, God changes his mind every 6 months in terms of how elders are supposed to function in the congregation. So we've got this book, which is apparently spiritual food at the proper time, and yet has to be updated every April and every October. So make that of what you will. But this is the latest edition of the Shepherd the Flock of God book. Now we are going to go into 2 chapters here. So the first chapter I'm going to take you into is chapter 8, which has to do with the appointment and deletion of elders and ministerial servants. And if you look through the chapter headings, you have got this heading that says situations that require a review of an appointed brother's qualifications. So Anthony Morris III was an appointed brother as a governing body member. You're also an elder. You have to be an elder to be a governing body member. So these are some of the situations that would call into question his qualifications as an elder or a governing body member. So let's go into them. So the first one is a member of his household gets involved in serious wrongdoing. Now, there is a checklist here that needs to be followed, but Anthony Morris III is an elderly gentleman, you could say, in his 70s. He has grown children. His children are not living with him. He lives in Bethel. And as far as we know, his children are in very good standing in the organization. So it definitely could not be that. Allows disfellowship to a disassociated family member to move into his home. Again, that would not apply to Anthony Morris III, as he lives at Bethel, and as I've said, his children appear to have to be in good standing in the organization. Supports the marriage of a baptized Christian to an unbaptized person. So this is where somebody potentially attends the wedding of a Christian or a Jehovah's Witness who has decided to be married to someone who is not one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I just don't see Anthony Morris III doing that. We all know how much of a hardliner he was with regards to the Jehovah's Witnesses teachings and policies, how very self-righteous he was, and it just doesn't appear like that he would be one of those people that would publicly act in a way that was contrary to some of the hardcore teachings of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, this one could be interesting. This one could have some legs. So, committed a disfellowshipping offense years in the past, and the matter was never addressed. So, I'm just going to read you through this paragraph. It says the body of elders may determine he can continue to serve if the following is true. And this goes back to what I was saying, that these policies are written by men who are in authority, and they're very much writing these policies in such a way that they can protect their positions if things get a bit dicey for them. So it doesn't say that this is an immediate cause for removal, right? So just you committed an offense, you've kept quiet about it, don't ask, don't tell. And now this comes to light. It doesn't say that you need to be removed. It actually, the first thing it says is that this person can continue to serve, Now, these are the reasons they give. So it says the immorality or other serious wrongdoing occurred more than a few years ago, and he is genuinely repentant, recognizing that he should have come forward immediately when he sinned. Perhaps he has even confessed to his sin, seeking help with his guilty conscience. He has been serving faithfully for many years, has evidence of God's blessing, and has the respect of the congregation. So if we were to assume that Anthony Morris III committed one of the offenses that are in chapter 12 of this particular book that require the formation of a judicial committee. Now, let's assume that this happened, say, in the 70s, the 80s, or the 90s, before he was ever in the governing body. What they're saying here is that if he's genuinely repentant, he's been serving faithfully for many years, and there's evidence of Jehovah's blessing, he has the respect of the congregation. In the case of Anthony Morris, the organization, the Bethel family, then there would be no reason to remove him as an elder or as a member of the governing body member. So it just shows that if it was a sin such as one of those highlighted in chapter 12, then there probably is some recency to it. Okay, so let's look at paragraph 26. It says, if the sin occurred before he was appointed as an elder or ministerial servant, the elders will need to take into consideration the fact that he should have mentioned this possible obstacle to his being qualified when elders met with him just prior to announcing his appointment. Moreover, the nature of the sin may reflect greatly on his qualifications to serve. For example, the sin may involve past child sexual abuse, which means that he would not qualify for many years, if ever. So I guess there is a bit of a clue here. So whatever Anthony Morris III did, if it involved past child sexual abuse, then that would be a reason for him being removed as an elder and as a member of the governing body. Now, I'm not suggesting that Anthony Morris III was involved in past child sexual abuse, but this is the black and white statement here. So if it was just any other sin, so for example, if he committed adultery, I don't know, took up professional boxing or something like that in the past, they would be looking at whether he has evidence of Jehovah's blessing, he's served faithfully. But if it was child sexual abuse, then that would automatically disqualify him, apparently, from what we can see here. Let's read further on. So it says, if the wrongdoing occurred within the past few years while he was serving as an elder or a ministerial servant, he is disqualified from serving as such, not being free of accusation. Depending on the circumstances, the situation may also need to be handled by a judicial committee. So apparently it all has to do with recency. So if this is something that Anthony Morris III has done within the past, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years, maybe, I don't know what they mean by the past few years, then they would be saying he would be disqualified. And notice they say he's not free from accusation. So I think here is a clue. So whatever Anthony Morris III did, they probably is people that are aware of this, that the governing body are not happy that these people are aware of, or the governing body are not satisfied that these people will not start making noise over whatever offense Anthony Morris III committed. And therefore they have to remove him, so that if his sin becomes public, they could say, well, he's not free from accusation and therefore he does not qualify. However, it also says that the situation may also need to be handled by a judicial committee, meaning it's not automatic that they formed a judicial committee. They could just remove him as an elder and a governing body member, but not necessarily form a judicial committee. So I would suggest that Anthony Morris III has committed some sin. I would say most likely it's a sexual sin, but it could be any other sin that's in chapter 12 of this particular book, and there are other individuals that are aware of this, and also there's probably a threat. They have probably threatened to reveal this action by Anthony Morris III, and that's why he's been removed from the governing body. I would also suggest that Anthony Morris III understands and accepts that he has committed this offense, and he has probably shown some kind of remorse to the governing body members, the rest of the governing body members, and he has accepted the discipline that he's been given. I'm gonna go into that in a bit more detail just a bit later. But let's look at this section here. Viewed pornography. So this is another reason they could remove you from serving as an elder. So let's go to chapter 13 and paragraphs 5 and 6. So it says, reviewing the qualifications of those serving in an appointed capacity, those who have viewed pornography. So it says, if the body of elders determines that a judicial hearing is not needed, but the matter involves an appointed person, such as a pioneer, a ministerial servant, or an elder, his qualifications should be reviewed, right? So if you view pornography as a serving elder or any other appointed person, and most likely that applies to a governing body member, then they are required to review your qualifications. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will remove you as an elder. They will just review your qualifications. And then there's a checklist here of what the elders should consider. What type of pornography was viewed? So Jehovah's Witnesses distinguish between what they call abhorrent and non-abhorrent pornography. So That's one of the questions. Then it goes on to ask, did the viewing of pornography consist of a few brief incidents, or was it a practice spanning many months or even years? Was the viewing of pornography accompanied by masturbation? When was the last time the person viewed pornography? Was the person counseled in the past about viewing pornography? Did he come forward voluntarily? If married, has he informed his mate of the problem? What effect has this had on the marriage? Who else are aware of the problem? Does the person still have their respect? Does the person demonstrate an earnest desire to desist from viewing pornography? Does the person's conscience allow him to continue serving in an appointed position? So you've got this checklist, which is again very much tilted in favor of the person in authority. So you could see if somebody like Anthony Morris III had viewed pornography and he was answering the right he was giving the right answers to these questions here, you could very much see a situation where he continued serving as a governing body member. Let's look at paragraph 6. The body of elders may determine that the person still qualifies to serve in an appointed position if, 1, his involvement consisted of a few brief viewings of non-abhorrent forms of pornography. So by that, they mean just what they would mean. They mean heterosexual pornography between adults, basically. That's what they mean by non-abhorrent forms. He displays a heartfelt desire to desist from looking at pornography. The elders are convinced that he will refrain from viewing it. He retains the respect of others who are aware of what he did, and 5, his conscience allows him to do so. On the other hand, a Christian who persists in viewing non-abhorrent forms of pornography cannot be considered as exemplary and thus does not qualify for special privileges in the congregation. So if Anthony Morris III was just watching pornography that they refer to as non-abhorrent, male, female, grown-ups, they most likely would not remove him from the governing body. They most likely would not remove him from serving as an elder, from what we're seeing here in the Shepherd book. So in the case of pornography, the only thing I would think of realistically is if he viewed, say, for example, child pornography, and this had come to light. There were people, say, for example, in the IT department at Bethel who'd seen him viewing this type of pornography. Then I think the organization would be concerned, the other governing body members would be concerned that this might come out, and therefore would act to remove him from the governing body. But I'm not suggesting that's what he did. I'm just giving you theories of the reasons why one can be removed as an elder, or in the case of Anthony Morris III, as a member of the governing body member. I think, to me, it appears that it was some kind of sin that requires a judicial committee formation, and there was people outside of the governing body that were aware of this sin, and they have threatened, potentially, that they would review Anthony Morris's actions, and the rest of the governing body were concerned about this, and therefore decided to ask Anthony Morris III to leave the governing body. I would not put it past the organization to even have paid the individuals, or the individual that would be aware outside of the governing body, paid them so that they keep quiet about their knowledge of this action or actions by Anthony Morris. I very much feel that it was kind of an amicable parting between Anthony Morris III and the other governing body members, as I will get to in a moment. And I think Anthony Morris, I think the likelihood is he's still very much a believing Jehovah's Witness. He probably agrees that he did something wrong and has shown some remorse, and he accepts the punishment, basically. And that's probably one of the reasons why we will never hear from Anthony Morris III. I don't think he's an apostate, or he has ill feelings to other governing body members. I think he's probably said, yes, you're right, brothers, I've made a mistake, and I agree with the punishment. So from the Shepherd the Flock of God book, we can at least glean the reasoning behind the removal of Anthony Morris III. To summarize, it's because he has committed a sin that's viewed as a judicial offense. It's quite a recent sin, and there is people outside of the governing body that would be knowledgeable of this offense. So now I'm going to go into the reason as to why we will never hear back. We'll never hear from Anthony Morris III. I've alluded to one of the reasons being still a believing Jehovah's Witness, agrees with the punishment he's been given, but there is a bigger reason why Anthony Morris III will very, very likely never ever speak out as to why he was removed from the governing body and his feelings about it. And for that, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to show you some footage from the 150th Gilead graduation program. And this is, I think, I personally found this very, very interesting, but have a look and see what you think.
Now, the students have certainly looked forward to this point for over 5 months, and they're going to transition into Gilead graduates. So this is what this is. Now, Brother Ken Flodine, a helper to the teaching committee, is going to assist by introducing the graduates and then letting us know where they're assigned. And we'll hand out the diplomas.
Uh-oh. Yep. And this is Brother and Sister Morris, and they will be remaining in the United States, where he will be serving as member of the branch committee.
Good. Congratulations, John. Awesome. Take a hug, boy.
It'll be hard to follow that one up.
Too, now, we have some of you here already going to be on branch committees, and that happened in past classes too. But see, some of them that went to their assignments, they weren't on the committee right away, but not too long after, some years, they're on the committee.
Even when I was still a Jehovah's Witness and I was a believing Jehovah's Witness, I found that really interesting. So Jesse Morris, one of Anthony Morris's sons, the older son, was part of the 150th Gilead class. And Anthony Morris III apparently orchestrated matters such that he served as the chairman of the graduation program in which his son was graduating from the class. And towards the end there, he makes, that is Anthony Morris, makes very interesting comments. He says that in previous classes, people would, they would go back to their assignment as Gilead graduates, and then maybe years later, they'd be appointed onto the branch committee. But in the case of his son, an exception has been made somewhat, such that he has been appointed directly to the branch committee, and not just to any branch committee. He's been appointed to the United States branch committee. If you watch the entire program there, you could see other people being sent to Paraguay or to other places, to Angola, to serve either as missionaries on the branch committee. But in the case of his son, they've made sure that he stayed in the United States and he's been made a member of the United States branch committee. And as I mentioned when I was going through the reasons why people are removed as elders, I said we have every reason to believe that Anthony Morris's children have a good reputation, a good standing in the organization. And here you can see one of his sons is actually a member of the United States branch committee. And even if Anthony Morris has ill feelings towards the other governing body members, even if he is angered by the fact that he's been removed from the governing body, he is very, very unlikely going to speak out against the organization, given that at least one of his sons is a high-ranking member of the organization. And that seems to be a source of very great pride to Anthony Morris. You could see his delight, you could see some kind of a nervousness, with the fact that his son was graduating from Gilead and being given such a high position. And I personally don't think Anthony Morris would want to jeopardize that at all. I think he takes a lot of pride in the fact that at least one of his sons is doing really, really well in the organization. And also you have to consider the fact that if he started speaking out against the organization, it appears that his son takes the religion very seriously. He would then be shunned by Jesse Morris, at least. We don't know too much about the other son, Paul, and I don't think Anthony Morris would want to risk that. And if you go into Anthony Morris's life story that was in the Watchtower, which I'm going to take you into actually to make your lives easier, you will see further evidence of the fact that Anthony Morris would not want to risk being shunned by his children. So let's go into that particular Watchtower. So this is the Watchtower of May the 15th, 2015, where we find Anthony Morris's life story entitled Remembering My First Love Has Helped Me to Endure. Quite an interesting story, I would say. I would recommend you read it if you haven't. I think one thing that was interesting as I was looking through this was that he says that the brother that studied with him was one of the anointed, and this is kind of a common theme. I think Gerrit Loesch makes a similar statement in his life story where two anointed sisters studied with him, and it seems like if somebody of the anointed has studied with you, then you are one of the anointed as well. Anyway, that's just a side point, but I thought I would find that quite interesting. So I'm just going to find the section where he talks about his family. So there is Anthony Morris in his younger years with his wife Susan and their two boys, Paul and Jesse, Jesse being the older one that we saw in the Gilead graduation program. There we go. And then there we see him with his family there. So there's Jesse Morris, the older of the children, and her wife that we've seen in the graduation. And then that's Paul and his wife. And he says they're spending time with my family brings me great joy. I'm just looking for the section where he talks about his family. So here he says in this paragraph, he says, Susan and I were blessed with two sons, Jesse and Paul. As they grew up, Jehovah was with them. Now, notice what he says next. He says, because they have made the truth their own, they make Susan and me look good. Interesting, isn't it? And again, this is very much a Jehovah's Witness culture thing where you live as a parent, you live vicariously through your children. So whatever your children are doing, so if your children are in Bethel or they're elders or they're pioneering, then that's a reflection on you. That makes you look good. That makes you seem to be a very spiritual parent. And Anthony Morris very clearly has that attitude. So even though Anthony Morris is no longer on the governing body, the fact that his son is still a high-ranking Jehovah's Witness, a member of no less than the United States Branch Committee, would still be a source of great pride for Anthony Morris III, and I don't think he would want to jeopardize that at all. He goes on to say they have continued to serve Jehovah because they have remembered their own first love. Each of them has been in full-time service for over 20 years. Also, I'm proud of my two beautiful daughters-in-law, Stephanie and Raquel, whom I view as my own daughters. Both of my sons married spiritual women who love Jehovah God with all their heart and soul. So if we're to assume, so we know that at least Jesse Morris is still very much a believing Jehovah's Witness, is still being used very much by the organization. We can assume that the same is true of Paul Morris. Anthony Morris would not speak out because these are people who are taking the religious seriously. He takes a lot of pride in that, and if ever he was to start to speak out, they would most likely shun him, given how seriously they take their religion. So I thought this was quite interesting, and I hope you viewers find this helpful. There is just a bit more I want to show, some more footage I want to show you. This footage is from the 153rd Gilead graduation program. Have a look and see what you think.
Well, now we're looking forward to the first talk of our Gilead graduation program. It's going to be from a member of the United States Branch Committee, Brother Jesse Morris, and his theme is, What Will You Be Called?
The greatest honor anyone can have is to be called a servant of the Most High God, Jehovah. And as you've seen from your deep study of God's Word, servants of Jehovah also have distinct personality traits and qualities that are called to mind when their names are mentioned. For example, what qualities or traits do you think of when we mention the following names? Ruth, Gideon, David, Martha.
So there goes another in the long line of boring, uninteresting, and uncharismatic Jehovah's Witness speakers. So this was Jesse Morris being given the privilege of speaking to the 153rd Gilead class during their graduation program. And this was literally a month after, or probably less than a month after Anthony Morris III was removed from the governing body. So this particular Gilead graduation program took place in March of 2023. Anthony Morris III was removed from the governing body in February of 2023, so less than a month after. And I guess that you could make that of what you make of that what you will, but to me that appears to suggest that Anthony Morris III is still very much in good books with the other governing body members, and this was probably in a way to show that to show the rest of the organization, the Bethel family, the graduating Gilead class, that Anthony Morris is still very much favored by other members of the governing body. They're still in very good terms. If you think about it, it wasn't long after his graduation that Jesse Morris is speaking to a Gilead class. He graduated from the 150th class. They have a class that runs every 5 months. So you can say every 6 months there is a graduation. There's a graduation program every March and every September. And literally 9 months after his graduation, no, sorry, did I say 9 months? Literally 18 months after his graduation, he's being given this heavy privilege of speaking to a graduating class. He himself being a recent graduate of the of Gilead. So that is highly unusual. We don't see other graduating students make such stratospheric rises in the organization. And of course, you could say, well, Anthony Morris was probably pulling some strings um, in the background while still serving as a governing body member. That's possible. There's a theory that's been that I've seen online where people have said that that talk was meant to be given by Anthony Morris III, and then once he was removed, it was assigned to his son. That is also a strong possibility. I would accept that as a possibility, but I think it all has to do with the message that the governing body want to send. They want to say, well, yes, Anthony Morris III has been removed from the governing body, but he's still very much our brother. His sons are still doing very well in the organization. He's still a respected member of the organization. That would be my theory there. So I guess that's about it in terms of my comments with regards to Anthony Morris III and why he was removed from the governing body. I have talked you through some of the main theories that have been floating online. I have told you why I don't think any of those are viable theories. I have given my own theory based on the Elders Manual Shepherd the Flock of God book, and I would strongly suggest that Anthony Morris committed an offense that is viewed as an offense that requires the formation of a judicial committee. This has happened in recent years, and the governing body view Anthony Morris as not someone free from accusation. In other words, there is someone holding some leverage against the organization if they do not remove him from the governing body, and most likely they've paid off this individual, and as a bargaining chip, they've removed Anthony Morris III from the governing body. But I think he's very much in good terms with the rest of the governing body. It's been an amicable parting, as reflected by the fact that they've even entrusted his son with a heavy privilege of speaking to a graduating class not long after his own Gilead graduation. So those are my comments with regards to Anthony Morris's removal. I just want to make my final comments as to why I've even bothered making this longish video a year after Anthony Morris III was removed. I just think if you're watching this as a believing Jehovah's Witness, what you need to think about is, how is it that somebody who was a member of the faithful and discreet slave, who apparently are appointed by Jesus, could just be removed just like that? And you are not, when he was a governing body member, everything he said and everything he wrote officially was spiritual food, and you had to accept everything he said um, and wrote, and yet he's just been removed just like that, and you have not been given any information as to why. When they appoint a governing body member, there's lots of excitement. There is, as you saw in the case of Gage Fliego and Jeffrey Winder, there was an announcement, a long announcement on the JW website, jw.org website, with all their credentials. There was even an interview they both did with Ken Cook. So there's a lot of fanfare, and the same was true with Anthony Morris III. When he was appointed, there was an article in the Watchtower, again, touting his credentials. And when it comes to his removal, it's just dead silence. It's just a one sentence, and that was hidden on the pages of JW Library, on the pages of jw.org, and then was quickly removed within less than a week. So I think that should cause you to question these people that are making decisions that affect your lives. And also, if you are, particularly if you are a Black or Black African Jehovah's Witness, I guess these comments would apply to people from Latin America, from Asia, and so on. We've never had a governing body member from any of these parts of the world, and yet, if we were to take the example of Africa, there is nearly 1 million Jehovah's Witnesses in Africa, and that's where the fastest growth is, and yet none of these people qualify to serve on the governing body. And yet you have individuals like Anthony Morris, who was probably one of the most outspoken, one of the most controversial members of the governing body, making these decisions that affect your life. And we don't even know um, any positive aspects of his personality that would warrant him being in such a position. And then they're making decisions that are very much detrimental to your well-being and your progress in life, and you just accepting that. So I think, as African Black Jehovah's Witnesses, that's something that you really need to think about, as to, is this a religion I want to be part of? Is this a religion that has my best interests at heart? And is this a religion that is being transparent in terms of its leadership? And why are they not selecting people from my demographic who actually represent a good portion of the overall Jehovah's Witnesses population? So I think that's a very, very important thing to think about. A final thing I just need to comment on as well, that I haven't commented on, is that yes, Anthony Morris's videos, some of his morning worship videos to be precise, were removed from JW Broadcasting, from jw.org, and I wouldn't read too much into that. A lot of his videos that were part of official programs, that were part of the annual meetings, that were part of the gala graduations, are still on jw.org, and you could say they're still considered as spiritual food. I think the reason for the removal of the morning worship videos is, again, just for maybe legal reasons, because with the other videos, they could easily say he was speaking from an outline, an approved outline that's been given by the organization, and therefore it's still spiritual food. Whereas with his morning worship videos, the likelihood is those are not from an approved outline. That's just a talk that any brother who is in that position constructs on his own. And therefore they probably feared some legal ramifications in leaving those videos. But the fact that they've left the rest of his content on jw.org, again, speaks to my point that Anthony Morris III is still very much viewed favorably by the rest of the governing body. So I hope you found this interesting and useful. And as always, please don't forget to like or subscribe to the Anthony Morris Returns channel, and this means that these videos can go out to more people and can be helpful to others. So before I wrap up this video, I've just prepared for you a 4-minute Anthony Morris highlights video, so please enjoy that.
Give me a drink. Sometimes we don't want to be counseling, criticizing prayers. We try to be careful with that, but sometimes you even hear a prayer at Bethel, it's like, okay, we're trying to eat breakfast here. and I've told folks, it's like, I just can't help it. Jesus is there, most eloquent person to walk the planet, and the meal comes, he raised his eyes to heaven and gave thanks. Amen. Let's eat, Now, don't be like this elder. Many decades ago, now it's a long time ago, so the circuit overseer and the elders on the body have concluded, amongst other things, but a major factor of disqualifying him is he's not humble. So he's appealing and he writes in, so it gets to the service department. Dear brothers, they've removed me. I want to appeal because one of the things they've said is that I lack humility. And brothers, I am the humblest man I know. Was in his letter. You can't make this stuff up. So, not a good thing. He was deleted. How much better to go by that beautiful, wise Scottish proverb. Oh, that some power the gift would give us to see ourselves as others see us. From many a blunder, it would free us. Think about it. See. Avoid a lot of blunders. And I have learned things from people that didn't like me. Can you believe it? But I thought, well, let me look at it. So you grow spiritually. So be careful, especially some of you getting an added amount of responsibility in your assignment. And just a word of caution, my experience, and I think my fellow members of the governing body would agree, I'll find out if they don't later, that the more responsibility I've received in the earthly part of God's organization over the years, the less authority I realize I have. And you don't get more responsibility than being a member of the governing body. And then I love this in verse 2. Do not be quick with your mouth. Boy, there's a lot of people in the world could benefit from that counsel. Isn't that true? It's like, does he or she ever shut up? I mean, I bet you they talk in their sleep. They just won't shut up, But we know that's Shem, Ham, and Japheth. That's what the scripture said. We don't know the names of the wife or the son's wives. Why? You can ask God, but I don't see anything in here going to tell me why he decided not to have it in there. That has nothing to do with being worthy. It's all about the lineage that went through, and, we all know better than, argue with God. God, I really love your word, but, a couple of things here. Not too bright to have that kind of attitude. So the God we worship expects this to stop. Real simple. Give me a drink.
Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Morris III, the man who vanished like smoke.
Sing. Hey. That's Jehovah's enemies. They're going to vanish like smoke.
But you can't do that, said one of the critics.
That doesn't bother me.
Really? Again? Really?
Look at that little enemy of God.
Somehow we dilly and dally, takes us years, and we wonder why.
What are you waiting for?